To Josh for all of his hard work in helping to increase the reach of our Torah learning and all that you do to help us in our Limud Torah. And of course, a special thank you to Rabbi Sam Shora, I saw is here as well, for all of his hard work. I'm just gonna 1 second. Okay, so two technical announcements. Today's morning of learning is dedicated by Estelle Harris in honor of our dear brave soldiers. Thank you, Estelle, for sponsoring today's learning. And this year is sponsored by Hedy and Ben Lipschitz. Thank you as well for your sponsorship. And as always, we daven that our Torah learning this morning should be a protection for our chayalim who are still on the front lines, protecting us, and we daven that our learning should also bring a nechama to all those affected by the war and a refuah to all those who are injured, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give guidance to our leaders to make the right decisions. Is the sound okay? It sounds a little bit off. I wish I could tell you that I knew. Josh, can you see if I don't know if is it Sam who sets it up? Is Sam McCartney here, or someone who might? Oh, Sam has a mazel tov. Mazel tov, Sam. Just it sounds a little bit. I wish I could say that I knew exactly how to do it. Is this better? Is this better? No. So maybe lower it. I could try just talking without it, but how's this? Is this better? Okay. I think we'll try that. Okay. Who had a baby? Sam? Sam had a baby? Sam McCartney. So those of you who know, Sam McCartney is the gentleman who's involved in all of this setting everything up. He's the young man who's like, look, he's walking, but he's running when he's walking. He's like running in and out, always taking care of all the various things that are making sure that everything happens. So very special mazel tov to Sam McCartney on the birth of a baby girl, and thank you to Sam for all that you do. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we are going to end our pretty long, but I think important conversation regarding the concept of Kavana in Tefila. And what we're going to do today is really just run through a number of suggestions that I've kind of put together, collated together, suggestions for how we can improve our Kavana. We've been talking a lot about the importance of Kavana, the sources for Kavana, the types of Kavana that we've had, what it means to have Kavana, and many of you have noted the challenge. We've noted it many times, the challenge. So a couple of you had asked, well, then can we discuss what we can do to make our Kavana easier, or to try to improve our Kavana? I don't know if I make it easier. It's going to be hard. That's the nature of Kavana. So what I did here is I really just brought a number of different ideas for us to think about. Some of these ideas have come up over the course of our conversations the last few weeks, but I wanted to bring it all together in one shiur just to be able to go over it, and hopefully it can be food for thought. By way of introduction, we're going to review just something we saw at the very end of last week's shiur, just a way to introduce this discussion, which is a recognition, starting with source number 1 from Rav Rimon, that there are no quick fixes. There's no, as Rav Rimon says here in source number 1, ein sigulot lekavana b'tefila. There aren't, certain things you can say, certain things you can do, jumping up and down or saying something, or there's no sigula that's going to automatically make our kavana better. Ein derech shetigrom lanu be'orech pele lehitkaven letefila. There is nothing that we could necessarily do that's going to magically enable us to have kavana in tefillah. Kavana b'tefillah doreshet avodah. In order to have kavana, we need to work. We need to work hard. It's avodah. Tefillah is avodah shebelev. Umibli shenashkia et ha'ma'amatz hanidrash, and without putting in the appropriate effort and time, lo nuchal hitkaven karoi. We won't be able to achieve kavana. Kavana is hard. Kavana is hard to do. It's hard for us to have kavana in our tefillot. But we have to first and foremost recognize very often we're looking for that quick fix. And with most things in life, right, lefum tzara agra, no pain, no gain. You have to push hard, you have to work hard, and you have to prioritize this in order to achieve something. Source number 2, Rabbi Steinsaltz also mentions this idea that there is no magic formula, as he says, but he also notes that this is something that can be different for different individuals. Source number 2, even though there is no magic formula that applies to everyone, there are ways to achieve kavana, meaning there are things that we can do to help ourselves. Each person's soul is a unique world unto itself, and what works for one person is not necessarily effective for another. Nevertheless, there are some pieces of advice that are likely to be useful to some extent for most people. And that's what hopefully we're going to discuss today, are a number of different types of suggestions. I divided them by categories. Again, food for thought. Whatever you think works for you, that'll help you. Something maybe to encourage us to work a little harder. So the first idea, the first suggestion, is actually the one that I think is very logical, but is not the first one that comes to mind, at least for me, when I think about how we can improve our Kavana. But when I saw it, I found it to be very, very important. And that is that Kavana, the concept of having Kavana, very much depends not just on the actions that we do, which we're going to see soon, how we prepare ourselves, the physical context of where we are, but it also has to do with our mindset and our belief system. We saw this earlier, we had quoted from Ramon earlier, that one of the reasons why people have trouble with Kavana is because they fail to properly internalize the message that everything we have is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we fully internalized that message, that we depend on HaKadosh Baruch Hu every single day for so much that we have, then coming to davening would be different. Because our attitude would be very, very different. Okay? For example, many of us know that when we're struggling, if a family member is sick, or is struggling something, then Rifa'enu becomes much more meaningful for us very often during those times. Why? Because we recognize this is something that's acute, it's something that is right now on our minds, and we're reminded of the fact that we're dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu for so many aspects. Obviously, we have to put in our hishtadlut. We have to do what we can in order to make things better and try to solve things from our end. But we also recognize that we're dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When a person is struggling with various types of whatever it's going to be, so then certain parts of Tefillah will become more meaningful. The more aware we are of our dependence on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the more meaningful or the easier it will be for us to have Kavana in Tefillah. Now, one idea that's just, the phrase that comes to mind also, in the similar context is, there are no atheists in a foxhole. When a person is in a time of intense need, very often they'll turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I can't help but think about so many of the inspirational stories that we keep hearing more and more now from all of the hostages that have come home. And to me, it's astounding that they're still functioning. That they're, and obviously I'm sure each and every one of them is struggling, and of course I don't, but the inspiration that they give just by who they are and the stories they tell us, and one of the things that I've seen over and over and over again is how much more connected they felt to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when they were in the times of captivity. And one of them even said that that's one of the things they miss, quote unquote, about captivity was that sense of closeness, that sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here. And again, I don't understand it, because it's something that it blows my mind from a perspective of, for someone to be in such a challenging situation, and yet to grow in their emunah and to grow in their connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the theme to me that I hear from that is this concept that the more that a person acutely sees or recognizes their dependence on a Kadosh Baruch Hu, then the easier it becomes to turn to them for something. So if you look here, it's source number 3, just to highlight this point. Rav Rimon also mentions this idea. Pa'amim rabot, ha'adam margish shehatzlacha tluya bo. Very often people think that their success, it depends on them. B'kishronotav o b'ma'amado, on their talents or their stature, who they are. Lo tamid hu miyaches et hahesegotav ligorem shemuchutza lo. He doesn't always attribute his accomplishments to anything beyond him. Right? It's me. Kochi ve'otzem yadi complex, as we say. B'tfila, adam mashrish bilibo. Through tefillah, and I would even say what he's even suggesting is part of what helps a person in their tefillah. Adam mashrish bilibo is when a person stresses or brings root into their heart. Shekol pu'ulotav tluyot bar Kadosh Baruch Hu. A recognition that everything that happens to us is dependent on Hashem. Abnam hu tzarich lif'ol. Of course, we have to act. We have to put in our hishtadlut. Achlo pu'ulotav v'kocho hem hayotrim et tzatlachato. But it's not your actions alone and your strength alone that's bringing about the success. Ela hashkachat Hashem. It is divine hashkacha. It is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Tlut muchletet be'akadosh Baruch Hu. Total dependence on Hashem. Hu yesod ubasis litfilah ulekavana amitit. That is a foundation for tefillah and for having true kavana. When we realize and remember that we're dependent on Hashem, then this is valuable time. This is our time. This is our opportunity to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about those things that we want and the things that we need and the things that we're striving for. Kedei lachush tlutzu, in order for a person to feel this type of dependence, kedei lahagia le'emda nafshit hamishachreret et yichus hahasegim mimeni u'ma'avira et hakoach liborei olam. The idea, the ability to recognize that it comes from Hashem and isn't all attributable to me, drusha hachana va'avodah rabbah. It requires preparation and it requires hard work. As he answered, that's what we call avodah shebelev. Avodah shebelev, part of it is, it's not just about what as we're going to see soon, most of the practical things we do to improve our tefillah, but it's also about our own mindset and our ability to recognize first and foremost, we depend on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we need HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the things that we're going to get. And therefore, this is an opportunity, and a real opportunity for us to appreciate that. Before I get to the question, I just want to finish one other thing. And then Rabbi points out that there's other types of belief that we need. It's not just a belief that we need, that we depend on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The other belief that we have to have in order for tefillah to be meaningful or to have kavanah is a recognition that our tefillah can do something. Is a recognition that when we daven, we have the ability to help ourselves through this act of tefillah. That's in the next part that he says, the next paragraph. Nikuda merkazit ba'avodat kavana. One of the main aspects of being able to achieve kavana, hi hahakara, is the recognition be'otzmata hamiyuchedet shel tefillah, recognition of the unique power of tefillah. Anachnu tzrichim lahagia letefillah mitoch imun. We have to come to tefillah based on a belief, shebikocha licholel shinoi, that through the tefillah we can affect change. Now, we're not going to get into the philosophical discussion of how that is done. Again, maybe we'll even do that soon. I think it's a fascinating discussion. There's different approaches to how exactly, what does that mean? Does Hashem change his mind? Do we change Hashem's mind? Do we change ourselves? That's a separate conversation. But we have to believe in the power of tefillah. Tefillah can affect change. Tefillah can help us achieve what we want. That is fundamental to having kavanah. Because if we come in and we don't believe in the whole system, then the chances of us being able to concentrate are much harder, much lower. La'adam hanimtza b'tchusha lo tova. If a person is in a place of not feeling good, doesn't believe that the tefillah is going to help, right? It's going to be very hard to daven if you're coming in with a fundamental thought that this isn't going to do anything for me. And therefore, fundamental to our ability to have kavanah is, number one, is to work on our belief system. Our belief system that, number one, we depend on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and number two, the tefillah can be an act through which we can affect or impact our relationship with Hashem and the things that we are going to achieve through that tefillah. So that's just suggestion number one. Section number one is one of the most important ways that we can improve our tefillah is by growing in our belief system on our dependence on HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the belief in the power of tefillah. Yes.
Saying that I feel it when I do Shemona Esrei because I understand the words. But in Tehillim, I say a lot of Tehillim every day, and it's very difficult. And I feel connected, and I feel that I'm asking Hashem, but I would understand it better in English. But yet it sounds beautiful in English. What do I do?
Okay, so you're asking a question that's come up a few times, which is, well, you said that in certain parts of Tefillah that you feel exactly what we're saying, but there are other aspects, and you mentioned specifically Tehillim, where Tehillim, it's hard for you to connect to the words or to the themes as easily as it is when we're Shemona Esrei, which, if we put in the effort, we can really understand the words of what we're saying. And it'll be much easier to do it in English, even though it's not as beautiful as in Hebrew. So it's a very, very good question. And this also comes up in the regular davening. What if somebody is saying Psukei de Zimra and they find it easier? Or someone is saying Shemona Esrei. So we've discussed in the past that halachically, we do believe, number one, we believe that the ideal is certainly to say it in Hebrew, because we believe that Hebrew has a certain koach, there's a certain power to the Hebrew language, and also that is the text that was developed and written by Anshe Knesset HaGadola, of whom include the Nevi'im and prophets, and therefore there's a certain power to certainly Shemona Esrei, but also to the words that the Melech wrote in Tehillim. There's definitely an ideal to say it in Hebrew. Halachically, a person is allowed to say these tefillot in Hebrew, even if they don't fully understand what they're saying, there's still a power to it. Alternatively, if somebody feels strongly that they can't connect to the words in Hebrew, they can say it in their native language. You can say it in English if that would be much more meaningful for you. However, and this is the part that I think is always important to add at the end, that doesn't mean that we should keep it that way and keep that the status quo forever. We should always be striving to work on understanding more. So if let's say, for example, you've been able to achieve Kavana in Shemot Esrei because you understand it, and Tehillim is an area that you don't understand as much, then if you feel that it's much more meaningful for you to say it in English, then you are halachically allowed to say it in English, say the English translation. But I think we should always be striving to work on this. Meaning we shouldn't just be like, well, I'm never going to understand the Hebrew, so I'll just always say it in English. No, you can say it in English if you feel that that'll make a big difference for you. But at the same time, you should also recognize that the ideal is Hebrew and continue to strive to understand it more. To have a weekly or a daily, whatever it is, 2 psukim a day to try to understand more of it, or to read it or use the interlinear. Many people like the interlinear, where it has the English translation right under the Hebrew. Meaning, we should always be. Some people don't like that. Some people find that very discombobulating. Everyone is different, but the point is that we should never lose sight of the ideal, which is to say it in Hebrew and to understand what we're saying, which for many of us come from a background where Hebrew as our native language is harder. It's one of the beautiful things I've always found that about when I learn with my kids and I read Navi with them. I don't have to read the Navi and then translate it. I read the Navi and they know what it means. It's amazing. That's what happens when you have kids that grow up in Hebrew. It's like a totally different world. It's like you're just starting from a totally different base. If we don't have that because of where we came from, okay, so then we have to deal with our reality while striving and putting in the work to continue to try to get to the ideal. Okay, so that is one idea. One idea is not just about practical preparation, but is very much about what we would call emunah preparation, which is just thinking about our own thought patterns and our own understanding and working on developing those ideas and trying to strengthen ourselves in those areas. The other section I call preparation for tefillah and post-tefillah, which is that we need to also be thinking about the things that we do on a practical basis before davening. By before davening, I mean in the immediate before davening, as well as at the end of davening. And you'll see why I'm adding at the end of davening, because very often how you act at the end of davening shows a lot about your overall attitude during davening itself. Okay, so look, this starts with a number of Gemarot that talk about how a person should not approach tefillah. Meaning, if a person has a certain mentality or has something else going on in their head, the Torah said, the Gemara says that is not the most ideal way for a person to approach tefillah. Look at source number 4. Tanu Rabbanan. Our rabbis taught, Ein omdim lehitpalel lo mitoch din. A person shouldn't come to daven based on judgment. Meaning, if you're in the middle of working on some kind of major legal issue, or some kind of issue that it is very involved, where all of a sudden it's going to distract you. V'lo mitoch davar halacha. And you shouldn't come to davening when you're engrossed in the world of halacha. What does that mean? I shouldn't learn halacha? What it means is if you're in the middle of a sugya, you're in the middle of learning something, and you're overwhelmed with it, and even if it's a good thing, you're excited about the learning, and you're thinking about it a lot, but what's going to happen is all of a sudden you just close the book, okay, Asher Yoshrei V'Secha, and now you start mincha. If your mind isn't there, then it's very hard to have proper kavanah. Ela mitoch, says the Gemara, halacha psuka. The ideal would be to try to not be in the middle of a large sugya while you're learning, but to have regular halachot psukot that are straightforward, that don't involve in-depth thinking. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara is basically talking about how we need to be thoughtful about how we enter our davening. Because what's going on in our minds right before we start davening is going to impact our ability to have kavana. Continues the Gemara a little bit more. Tanu Rabbanan, ein omdim lehitpalel. We don't get up to daven lo mitoch atzvut, if we are in an unusual state of sadness. V'lo mitoch atzlut, if we are in a lazy state of mind. If we're in a state of mind where we're just not in the mood for anything. Lo mitoch schok, okay, we're in a place of gaiety, or just overly happy, gaiety, I think is just the appropriate word. Lo mitoch sicha, if you're in the middle of a very intense conversation, which means emotionally you're invested in something at the time. V'lo mitoch kalus rosh, right? And we shouldn't be joking around. V'lo mitoch dvarim b'telim, and you also shouldn't be davening when you're involved in things that are a waste of time. Ela mitoch simcha shel mitzvah. Rather, our mindset should be one of approaching davening with a happiness to be involved in the mitzvah. Aha, good. So someone is saying, well, that's a good excuse not to daven. I wake up in the morning, I'm feeling pretty lazy today. Oh, well. Okay, so that's exactly what I think. It's very important to realize the Gemara isn't saying that if you're in that state, you're putter from davening. This is more a challenge than it is an excuse. What do I mean by that? What the Gemara is saying is, it doesn't mean, all of a sudden I'm sad, I guess I don't have to daven today. No. If you're in a state of sadness, or you're in a state of frustration, or you're in the middle of a sugya, what that means is you need to make sure to give yourself time to hopefully work to get yourself out of that state. Okay, meaning, it doesn't mean, what it means is, you need to realize, you need to say, wait a second, I'm in the middle of, what it means is I shouldn't be running to davening right in the middle of doing something else. I need to give myself time. It's a recognition that before davening, maybe I need 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes to sit down and help myself. Get out of whatever intense emotions are going on at the time, and then go to daven. Now, of course, there's going to be situations where a person dealing with an unusual sadness or unusual depression, chas v'sholem, meaning that, but that's not what the Gemara here is referring to. The Gemara is referring to a person who's rushing into davening from something else that will make it harder for him to daven. And what the Gemara is basically saying is you need to take the proper time to stop and to enter the world of tefillah from a much more, from equilibrium. And from also, as it calls it, simcha shel mitzvah, a recognition that I'm about to do the mitzvah, and an excitement to do that mitzvah. Now, the truth is that there are certain practical things that are mentioned in the halacha regarding this, regarding these two parts of the Gemara. If you look in the source number 5, the Pninei Halacha, Rav Eliezer Melamed, in his book on Hilchos Tefillah, gives a couple of practical ideas. What does it mean, simcha shel mitzvah? What does it mean I should enter the simcha shel mitzvah? So there are a couple of minhagim that some communities have to help encourage this simcha shel mitzvah. For example, tov latet, source number 5, the beginning. Tov latet tzedakah lifnei tefillah. Many people have the minhag to give tzedakah before tefillah. Kedei lageshet latefillah mitoch simcha shel mitzvah. So that you're entering the davening through the simcha of having done a mitzvah. So it doesn't just mean the mitzvah of davening, it also means other mitzvah that you do. And there's also, I know many people have the minhag, many women have the minhag to give tzedakah before they light Hanukkah candle, before they light Shabbos candles. Hanukkah candles too, I'm sure. It's always good to give tzedakah. But the idea is you're entering your davening involved in an act, involved in a meaningful act, a simcha shel mitzvah. Ve'od, and then he says, what's another reason why it's good to give tzedakah before you daven? If you're going to ask Hashem to give you things, you should also show that you have a certain sense of mercy and a sense of care for other people, and then hopefully HaKadosh Baruch Hu will respond in kind to you. This has become much more popular in today than it ever was in terms of known. The Ari HaKadosh, the Arizal was known to say that one of the ideas of a simcha shel mitzvah, shetov lehitbonein lifnei hatzfilah b'mitzvat ve'ahavta l'oreacha kamocha. What is one mitzvah we should be thinking about before we daven? The mitzvah of ahavta l'oreacha kamocha. There's even a phrase, hareini mekabel alai mitzvat aseh ve'shel ve'ahavta l'oreacha kamocha. And many communities have started to say this communally before davening. Because the idea is, again, this is also, again, number one, a simcha shel mitzvah. I'm entering with this sense of connection to OUisrael, this recognition and this understanding that who I am is part of a larger community. And I think it also adds to the concept of tefillah b'tzibor. The more that you connect to those around you, the more that you think about those around you, the more that can add to your tefillah b'tzibor. Shehi klal gadol, says Rav Melamed, v'chol ha'tefillah kula ne'amra b'lashon rabim. All of our tefillah is mentioned, it's said in the plural, mipnei she'anu mitpalalim ala tzibor kula. Because as we know, our tefillah itself is meant to be davening for the entire community. And then Rav Melamed continues to talk about what we mentioned before, that not only should you be coming from simcha shel mitzvah, but you also shouldn't be coming to davening engrossed in other things. Lo yavo, the second paragraph in source number 5. Lo yavo adam l'tefillah mitoch tirda. You shouldn't come to davening when you're involved or frustrated or upset. You're involved in other things. Even if you're somebody who has you've decided that you want to set a chavrusa before davening, make sure that you learn something that's not going to be too be too involved. Right? You shouldn't be involved in an intense sugya right before davening. Because then you're going to be thinking about the sugya and the back and forth, the questions, this opinion, that opinion, and it'll be hard for you to have kavana. Ela yilmad samuch letfila in yanei halacha brurim. Rather, what you should learn is either halacha, that's very straightforward, or concepts in hashkafa. concepts in Emunah that will hopefully inspire you as you enter the davening. Umikol makom, and this is important. B'diavad lo yivatel tefillah b'minyan b'pnei shehu tarud b'inyanei Torah u'maseh. But again, it's very important. This doesn't mean that, let's say you're in one of these states of mind, you say, I don't need a daven. No, you shouldn't miss davening, and you shouldn't miss davening with a minyan. If you find that you're frustrated about something, do what you can to improve that. But the Gemara is saying that you shouldn't daven for your bent in an ideal sense. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't daven if you happen to be upset or you happen to be thoughtful about something. Kedei shelekol hapachot b'dakot hasmuchot l'tfilah ya'asku b'dvarim miromimum u'misabchim. And then he adds that in one of the things Chazal did to help facilitate this idea that we enter our tefillah learning or thinking about or learning about spiritual and important things. Tiknu chachamim lomar lifnei tfilat amida dvarim misamchim. That's why the text of the tefillah, what we say right before Shmona Esrei, are actually themes that are meant to be inspiring. For example, lifnei tfilat shacharit ve'arvit omrim et habracha Ga'al Yisrael. One of the reasons, says Rav Malami, that the bracha of Ga'al Yisrael, the bracha of Hashem, who we believe has redeemed and will redeem Yisrael, is said right before Shmona Esrei. It's because these are themes that are meant to be inspiring, that are meant to be meaningful for us. Now, unfortunately, they just become things that we're used to saying, and we don't necessarily think about them as much. But the reason they were picked, says Rav Malamid, is because they're meant to inspire us as we enter Shemona Esrei. V'lifnei tfilat mincha, we say Ashrei. And Ashrei, again, is a praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All of these, so what Rav Malamid is pointing out here is that part of the text of the davening is created in such a way to help facilitate this inspiration, and so that we enter Shemona Esrei in a certain state. But of course, we have to put in that work as well. Yes?
But what if things pop into your head? Sometimes, so I never write it down, so you won't think of it again. It won't be on your mind.
If things pop into your head, that means you're normal. Okay, I'm not familiar with anybody who does not struggle with this challenge. I think that every single person is different, and I think anything you can do before to do something during Shemona Esrei is a little harder because you're in the middle of the act. So to write it down, and I wouldn't say to write it down during Shemona Esrei. But if, let's say, there's something on your mind and you're afraid you're going to forget it, if writing it down before you start, certainly the Shemona Esrei or the main part of davening will help you. Great, and you know what? Chances are, things are still going to pop into your head during Shemona Esrei. And that's why we're going to get to it soon. But part of this is also going to require a certain effort that we have, even during Shemona Esrei, to create a certain environment and a struggle that each of us has to what we call B'shas Maisa during the actual Shemona Esrei to work on this. We're giving lots of different suggestions here. It's not going to solve everything, but it's all just about continued working. Yes?
Sometimes I'm at a point in the Amidah that I don't remember doing what I was just doing. Like I'm here already. Did I do everything? Do I just stop and let myself?
Yes. So in fact, what you just mentioned is actually, we learned this, those of us who were there the first year we had on Kavana, we mentioned a Yerushalmi, where one of the rabbis in the Gemara mentioned that thank God his body knows what to do when it gets to certain things. So that when it gets to modim, the body automatically knows to go like this. He's basically saying that he's not thinking about it, he doesn't even realize it, right? And all the time that happens, right? Finally, all of a sudden you're doing this, you're like, I'm up to that already? Totally normal. And I think we're going to see soon. The best thing to do is if you get to a point where you recognize, and we mentioned, it used to be, meaning the initial psak of the Shulchan Aruch and specifically of the Shulchan Aruch was that when it comes to Shemona Esrei, you needed to have Kavana for the first bracha of Magen Avraham. And if you didn't, the halacha used to be, initially was, you should go back and repeat it. Nowadays, the psak is we don't do that. Why? Because we don't have confidence that if we repeat it again, we're going to have Kavana again. That's just the state that we're in, and that's the psak now. So you don't have to go back and repeat anything. If you're in the middle of you find yourself up to modim, all of a sudden you're going like this, and you're like, "Wow, I'm up to that already." Yes, stop right there, collect yourself, and strive to have kavana for the rest of tefillah. And recognize, okay, this is a challenge, and next time I'll try to do better. But right now, this cannot test. I would even say challenge yourself. Can I have kavana for modim until the end of Shemona Esrei? If you can do that, then you're probably better than most of us here in this room, at least certainly myself. So, okay. I see a couple of questions. Yes.
One other comment, that one way of doing it is thinking that what you're praying to Hashem is something
Sure.
In other words, they say, Baruch atah Hashem, you're blessing God. So you can ask yourself, is God really going to keep the blessing? Well, but people also need me to recognize that, to bless them. And that, as I learn from this, is that I should be doing this to God. And
So I think it's a very it's a very nice idea. I think every person. I'm hesitant to give specific thoughts about what these are because I think every person will relate to it differently. Whatever a person can do, we're going to see. Whatever a person can do to help them be able to focus on what they're doing, if it's about connecting what you're asking from the act of what you're asking from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to how you deal with other people, if that works for you, amazing, great. Meaning everybody's different, everybody's unique, and and therefore I think it's a very nice idea. The idea is to try to, what you're basically saying is to try to personalize it. Try to personalize the message to make it meaningful for you. For you, personalizing it means turning it not just into my relationship with Hashem, but also into my interpersonal relationships, which I think is very, very meaningful. We believe that there's an idea that our interpersonal relationships mirror our relationship with Hashem, and therefore, if that's what's meaningful, then I think that's great. I think for each of us, it's going to be a little bit different, and that's the beauty of who we are as a people, is that for each of us, how we do this is going to be a little bit different. And again, along the same lines, regarding the importance of preparation before Tefillah, we have the famous Gemara that we've mentioned before. We'll just mention it here. Source number 6. Tanya Nami Hachi. The Braita teaches the following: Hamit Palel tzarich sheyish'eh sha'a achat kodem tfilato v'sha'a achat achar tfilato. Somebody who davens needs to dedicate an hour before davening and then an hour after davening. Kodem tfilato minayin. How do I know that I'm supposed to dedicate an hour? Shneimar ashrei yoshrei veitecha. The pasuk says ashrei yoshrei veitecha, and from there they learn that you're supposed to take time to sit and ponder and work on your tefillah before you start. Excuse me. La'achar tfilato minayin. How do I know from after davening? Dichtiv, the pasuk says, Ach tzadikim yodush lishmecha yeshvu yisharim et panecha. Okay? It says that yodu lishmecha, they're going to daven for you, and then they're going to sit in your presence after davening. So we have this idea of sitting down or taking time an hour before davening, an hour after davening, and then the Gemara quotes famously, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us, Chasidim Rishonim, the original Chasidim, hayu shohim sha'a echat, they used to sit there for 1 hour, umit palalim sha'a echat, and then they would daven for an hour, and then they would sit for another hour, which means, by the way, that they spend double the amount of time preparing before and after than for the actual act of davening. Now, does this mean that every single one of us needs to now spend 9 hours a day davening because we get before Shacharis, Mincha, and Mariv? I'll leave that up to you. What I mean to say is that the idea is the most important thing here, which is the idea of taking time before davening to gather your thoughts, to recognize what you're about to do. Whether that means coming 2 minutes before davening, or if it means those of us who put on talis and tefillin coming 10 minutes before davening so you can have your talis and tefillin on before the davening starts, or it means coming 15 minutes, you can have a few minutes to learn. For every single person, your ability, what you can do, what you can't do, and this isn't about, trying to guilt anybody into anything. It's about recognizing that these are the things that will make a difference. And the more that we can incorporate them into our lives in a meaningful way, the more that we'll be able to daven. The more that we invest in this experience, the more meaningful it's going to be. And what's striking about this is that he's not just talking about, is that the Gemara doesn't just talk about before davening. Because you would think that when is the focal point? The pre-davening. After davening is over. Why do I need to sit there for an hour or even for a few minutes after davening? Ideas? Thoughts?
this is something that should be spoken to not just to the person davening, but also to the shul.
Yes. I'm talking to everybody.
No, but I'm saying in each shul.
I don't want to get it again.
Because how can you even begin to do this if the davening consists of chazan, blah, blah, blah.
We're not going to go back. I'm sorry. I know this is a pet peeve of yours. I'm not minimizing it, but I disagree with you. I disagree with you on. I'll tell you what I disagree with you on. And I don't want to spend too much time on it. I agree with you on the point that the chazan needs to be, but I disagree with the fact that we're so dependent on the tzibur. Meaning, let's say you daven in a place that's what the chazan does. Number one, I would challenge you to say, and I'm just not you. I would challenge each of us to say, number one, so maybe we shouldn't daven there. Maybe now again, I'm not talking to you specifically. I'm saying if we're unhappy with the pace and the nature of the tefillah, Baruch Hashem in Yerushalayim, there's no shortage of minyan. Although again, maybe it's the most convenient, maybe it's where your friends go. I'm not minimizing other factors. Number one, you could always ask, should I be davening there? Number two, let's say that's the place that you go to. That's where your wife wants to go. That's the closest to your shul. Okay, what can I do to make it easier for me? If I know that the pace of the davening is going to be quick, then maybe I should come 20 minutes before davening in order to. I remember there was a time when I was in my yeshiva days, and I decided I wasn't going to go to the main minyan when I was growing up. Anyway, I went to the Hashkama minyan, because if I went to the Hashkama minyan, then I have time to learn. This was when I was, in my inspired days. The problem was the Hashkama minyan went really fast. So I knew that if I was going to the Hashkama minyan, I would try to get there earlier. I would start Pesukei Zimra before the tzibur. I wish I could say that I'm as consistent in doing that nowadays as I was back then. But the idea is still the same. We're not always we're certainly dependent on certain aspects of the davening. We're dependent on the tzibur. But in many ways, it's a personal thing. If we know that the pace is going to be hard for us, then get there earlier. There's no rule that you have to say every paragraph of Pesukei Zimra with the tzibur. Now, maybe there is a concept of trying to get there, that when they get up to Yishtabach, you should as well. But even that, if you know the pace, that if you know that if you start with the tzibur at Yishtabach, you will not be able to start Shemona Esrei with them because it takes you so much longer, then you know what? There's actually a concept of you can start Birkot Kriyat Shema by yourself. What you should ideally do is to try to get to the end of one of the brachot of Birkat Kriyat Shema when they get up to Yishtabach, so that you can answer to Kaddish and to Baruch Hu. Meaning there are ways that you can improve this and not be fully dependent on the tzibur. Happy to talk about that in private. This was a specific situations, but this is not just about the tzibur. It's also very much about us. Okay, I see a couple more questions, and then I just want to make sure we have enough time.
This Gemara really raises a fundamental issue. What's more important, to sit for an hour thinking about God, or to actually do something useful in the world? Now, many of us are not in that.
Again, Hasidim Rishonim used to do this. This was, again, for them, the act of tefillah was such an important, powerful, and I think they would even say active part of what they were doing, that for them, that was a proper investment. Whether or not that's a proper investment for each of us is an individual decision. I don't think this is an either or, and I don't think it's also necessarily for the masses. That's why I don't think they're saying that every single person should strive for this. But I think the message is the same. The message of having time before davening and having time after davening, that we don't rush into davening, we don't rush out of davening, that message I think is an important message. Yes?
I think too, not an hour maybe, but a few minutes is just kind of to just soak in the Kavana, the relationship. It's not like you cut off, one of your kids tells you an important story, you go, okay, now we're through that. Let's move on to something else.
Correct, 100%. 100, exactly. I think the idea, I think this is getting back to what I had asked, which was, what's the value of spending time after davening? The idea is that if you've been in an intense experience, you take time to process that experience. The purpose of davening is not just the act of davening, is to hopefully incorporate whatever we've gained from that davening to our daily life. If we just rush out, that we're standing at the door with our tefillin and talis in hand, by the time, so that when the last Kaddish ends, everyone's running out the door, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. Again, I'm talking to myself here, because these are things that we all struggle with in different ways. But if we take the idea of sitting and taking time to process, shows, number one, the importance of the davening, and number two, it enables us to hopefully incorporate and use the davening to impact the rest of our day. And that is only going to be done if we put proper thought into it, and not if we rush and expect it to happen automatically. Okay, just because of time, I want to, if it's okay, I'm sorry, I just want to go on because I want to make sure that we cover a lot of these different things, and then just again, a lot of food for thought. We're going to skip different parts, because again, I want to make sure that we get to everything. We're going to skip now to section number 4. Section number 4, creating in a conducive. So that was section number 3. Was basically just the idea was pre-preparation, pre-davening preparation, and post-davening preparation. Those are things that we could be thinking about, that we can each do on an everyday basis to help impact our kavana. Next, creating an environment conducive to tefillah. We have much more control over our environment than we realize if we think about it. For example. Okay, I wrote here just little notes for you to think about. The location of davening. Do I daven in a shul or do I daven at home? Okay, now those of us who are chayav in a minyan, definitely make sure you daven ideally in a minyan. For many women, that's a question that you have to ask yourself. For many women, coming and davening in shul is much more meaningful for them, and there's also the power of davening b'tzibur, of davening in a shul. But there are women who say, no, I find that I have better kavana at home. And again, it could be certain tefillot you'll want to make. We discussed the idea of davening b'tzibur and in the shul for women, but that is more of a question there. In shul, okay, we see also, if you look at source number 11, the Meiri highlights that one of the reasons we're supposed to daven in a shul is because a shul is more conducive for davening. Kol she'adam yachol hitpalel b'veit knesset yasa mipnei shesham kavanat halev mitzuya. Says the Meiri, generally speaking, a person is more able to concentrate when they're in shul. We associate, hopefully, shul with davening, and therefore, when we enter the shul, our mindset is a little bit different than if we're in our pajamas, sitting on our sofa in the salon. Okay, and therefore, associations are important. Our associations, even subconscious associations, are important. If we keep going, and again, davening with a minyan is a similar type of idea. Davening with a minyan enables us, again, there's the power of davening with a minyan. For some people, there are challenges davening with a minyan. Certain challenges can be the pace, or it could be getting distracted. So then the question becomes, well, which minyan do you go to? And these are all questions we should be thinking ourselves. When we decide what minyan we go to, does the minyan we go to depend on where our friends are going and where they have the best kiddush after davening? Which is not to minimize the importance of kiddush and being with our friends. Or do we rather, the most important question we're asking is what's most conducive for me to daven? Do you have a makom kavua in shul? Having a makom kavua, having a set place, we spoke about this before, the importance of a makom kavua. Look at source number 15. Again, we're jumping around a little bit just because of time. Source number 15, Rav Nevinsal talks about the importance of having a set place for davening. Again, because when you have a set place, you're much more able to enter a certain mindset if it's the place that you associate with davening. Lo yishaneh, says the Rav Nevinsal, afilu lebeit midrash shekidushato gedola yoter mipnei shahashinui mivabel da'ato. Okay, a person shouldn't keep changing. Or he's in here, he's davening here. He shouldn't then switch to another shul or to a based medrash, which maybe has a greater level of kedusha if it's a place where people learn and where they daven. You shouldn't keep changing your spot. Why? Because the more that you change your spot, you get confused. Your ability to sit and to focus is much less. Ve'od, he says, shekviyut makom notenet chashivut latfila. When you have a makom kavua, it shows a certain prominence and importance that you have towards the tefillah. So makom kavua, do we have a makom kavua? Now again, that doesn't mean you kick somebody out, right? There's always going to be balance. If someone's in your seat, find a place right next to your makom kavua. Don't necessarily kick them out. There are some shuls that unfortunately are notorious for that, and it's important to be welcoming, while also recognizing the value of makom kavua. Sometimes you have competing values and you won't say anything to somebody. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a makom kavua. Where is your makom kavua? Is your makom kavua in the back, in the peanut gallery, next to your friends? Or is makom kavua in the place that you feel is most conducive to davening? All of these are things that we decide and we have control over, and they will impact our ability to have kavana. Just going down the list of things that I brought here, what type of shul minyan and what's the pace of the minyan? What's the decorum of the minyan? Do you go to a minyan that rushes and has a lot of talking? Or do you specifically look for a place that maybe has less talking and an environment that's more conducive for davening? There's a reason why the halacha says that a person shouldn't talk in shul about things that aren't connected to davening. Because that's the association you should have. And again, not to minimize the importance of social aspects of davening, and not to minimize the importance of hanging out with your friends, but davening is a time for davening, and if you care about davening, that should be your priority more than anything else. In fact, there's even a tefila. The Tosfot Yom Tov wrote a tefila that many shuls say, blessing those, giving a bracha to those who don't talk during davening, because there is a value that davening should be a time for davening, and you should create, and you should be striving to find a place that adds to that. Okay? Singing versus no singing. There's no right answer to that. Some people are inspired by singing. Some people are inspired by it. There are some shuls that I think maybe sometimes take it too far. I'm somebody who generally enjoys singing. Some shuls I think prioritize the singing and dancing over the actual prayer part, the davening part. But the concept of having singing that helps you in your tefillah is great. And this is an individual question. I'm just putting out these ideas, things for you to think about. The overall vibe, what is the avirah of the shul? Does it encourage you to grow in your kavana? And I want to read with you this source number 16 from Rav Steinsaltz, where he again talks about how this is a choice that you make that will impact your kavana. All of these are questions that you need to ask that will have an actual impact on your kavanah. Source number 16. There is also the human environment, the congregation in which a person prays. From one point of view, the worshiper is always alone and isolated, even when praying among a large group of people. The focal point of his prayer is the relationship between the I and the divine thou of God as he reveals himself at that particular moment. Even though prayer is mostly formulated in the plural form, uniting the individual with the nation as a whole, in essence, it is a private expression and a personal attachment, right? It's very individual. Even when we're b'tzibor, we're still connecting with Hashem. Just as one cannot be nourished by the food eaten by another, so too he cannot pray except by himself. A person, right? No one can pray. People can pray on my behalf for me, but no one can pray in my place. The experience is an individual experience. But from another point of view, a person praying by himself does not do so only as a separate individual. The prayer of every Jew is always, in truth, in the name of all of Israel. As those of you who were with us, we had read a couple of months ago, a beautiful essay by Rav Soloveitchik, who talked about that the reason why the shul is called the Beit HaKnesset is because we're representing all of Knesset Yisrael. Knesset Yisrael, future and past, the beautiful concept of recognizing the power of our tefillot. The individual standing alone in prayer carries with him his environment, the people to whom he is connected in various ways, and even the inanimate objects that are around him. Where you sit, the place where you're sitting impacts your davening. For this reason, when praying in public, a person should always seek a congregation that will be supportive of his prayer, rather than the contrary. In a praying congregation, the prayer of each person strengthens and encourages the prayer of every other individual. At moments of emotional weakness or dullness of the heart, one may participate in and be swept along by the praying congregation. And then he brings a beautiful, beautiful teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, which I had never heard before. Really a beautiful idea. The congregation acts like a circle of dancers, giving constant support to one another, helping the individual overcome weariness and continue further than each one might do alone. The Baal Shem Tov explains this by means of a parable. In order to reach the heights, the worshippers create a kind of human ladder, each one standing on the shoulders of the next, thus enabling the individual to climb up high. Anyone who leaves his ladder not only removes the rung, but destroys the entire ladder. On the other hand, one who finds a congregation suited to his prayers is invigorated and elevated through it and by his participation in it. Many of us remember those moments where we were in a tefillah, in a certain community, in a certain davening, where we were just inspired tremendously by the entire experience. And this is what we did. Each of us kind of, kiviyachol, we kind of put ourselves on each other's shoulders, raising each other's to new heights. That is what a tzibor is meant to be. And when we're looking for a shul, and we're talking about wanting to improve our kavanah, we should be asking ourselves, where is that shul that will help improve my level of kavanah in the most meaningful way possible? Again, just to finish this up, we only have a couple of minutes left, but other things to think about, important things to think about, wardrobe for tefillah. What am I wearing when I come to davening, right? We know that there are many people in the certain communities that have a hat and a jacket, and that's halacha. Many people wear a gartel. We're not going to get into the halachic analysis of that right now, but what we wear impacts how we feel and what we think about. And there are some people who cover their heads when they walk into davening. Some people don't. Some people make sure they're wearing long pants, short sleeves, long. Again, to me, it's not about the specifics, but these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves when we talk about having kavanah. We're all impacted by all of these types of things. Other questions we ask. Now we're up to section number 5, removing distractions. Being active about removing distractions from our tefillah. Who do I bring with me to davening? We've spoken about this. Bringing kids to davening, bringing young children to davening, not only impacts you, impacts those around you. What do I bring with me to davening, right? Last week we spoke a lot about phones, okay? Even if you have the phone and it's on silent and it's right over here next to you, it's going to impact you. Subconsciously, you're thinking about that phone. If you put the phone away in the other room, that might be the only way, maybe, that you'll be able to not be thinking about your phone or the messages that you're going to get. What do I bring with me to davening? Now, again, this doesn't mean that a person should never have their phone. If you need to have your phone, again, these are just food for thought, and everyone can take them in the way that they want to. Sfarim, alonei Shabbat, right? I'm not going to, Torah tidbits, I think that it even says you shouldn't read it during davening, right? Read Torah tidbits not during davening. Or read it at times when you have a break during davening. But these are things, sometimes we bring all these alonei Shabbat. Like you see the guy who comes into davening, he has like 15 alonei Shabbat sitting there right next to him. It's beautiful to read alonei Shabbat, but make sure it's not being used as a crutch to just get through the davening time and a way of kind of almost avoiding facing the actual davening. Using a siddur versus by heart. Again, the halacha supports both of them. It's an individual type of question. There are sources in both directions. Many sources suggest that you should use a siddur. Reading from the siddur will help you make sure you avoid mistakes and help you focus. Whereas other people find closing their eyes and almost entering a meditative state. Again, I'm just going to mention it quickly. If you look in source number 18, we're not going to see it inside. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan has a wonderful book called Jewish Meditation on Tefila. And he talks about how, no, the goal is to close your eyes and enter a certain state of meditation. For some people, that's more mat'im than reading a siddur, which would be distracting for them. The other idea is we're trying to detach from everything else. We spoke about this as well. You asked, what happens if all of a sudden in your mind things pop up? So part of what we need to work on, I'm sorry for the question, it's just because we have to end. Part of what we need to work on, and this is, again, you read sources, we can do this, is work on controlling our minds. Something pops into our head, stop for a second, and work on trying to push that thought out. And if at the beginning it's hard to do it, again, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan talks about this beautifully in his book on Jewish meditation, about how meditation is not always sitting and crossing your legs and doing what we envision in the Far East. Meditation just means controlled thinking. And we can have control of our thinking if we work on it and we work hard on it. The last thing, just to finish up. Again, there's a lot here to talk about. Out loud versus should you say the davening out loud? Should you sing it versus quietly? You should never. Again, if you're in shul, you should not disturb other people. That should be a base. But if you're at home, can you say it out loud? Each of this is different. Some people are better when they say it quietly. Some are better when they say it out loud. Shuckling versus not. We talked about that as well. Again, these are individual, but these are all things that we could be thinking about that will impact our ability to have kavana. And the last thing here is just to end. I see here we didn't even do this part. The very, very end. Look here, it's a source of things. Study the Tefila. One of the best ways to be able to work on your kavana is to know what you're saying. Know what you're saying and continue to grow in it. Doesn't mean you have to sit there and spend 5 hours right now learning all of the Tefila. 10 minutes a week. 10 minutes a week can make a huge impact in your davening. And Rav Rimon gives a number of suggestions, which I brought here. Have a time set aside. Underline the parts that speak to you specifically. Make it personal. Add your own tefillot. Make headings in your siddur. He pointed out in certain siddurim they have a heading right before each bracha. And that heading might help you. Just see it for a second. Now I'm about to say, Es tzemach David avdecha. What is that about? What is V'Yerushalayim Yircha? If you have a heading in your siddur, these are, again, every person can decide what works for them, but the goal is a recognition. Learn Hilchos Tefillah. If you learn more what you're supposed to be doing in the halachot of Tefillah, it will help you get ready for what you're supposed to do. And the final thing Rav Rimon says in source number 24, which I'm just going to mention out loud outside, is if you're having trouble with kavana, daven to Hashem that He should help you for kavana. Again, that's not going to replace the work that we're putting in, but it's okay. It's okay for us to turn to Hashem at one point and be like, Hashem, I can't. I can't think, I'm having so much. Daven to Hashem that He should know. It's like we say, that many people say when it comes to Tisha B'Av, not being able to connect to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So we should want to want. We should want to want the Beit HaMikdash. The same thing is here. We should daven to Hashem that He should help us have kavana in our tefillah, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We're asking Hashem to help us in everything that we're doing. And the closing message is as follows: we should continue to work, and we should continue to work hard. All of these things, these are all just headlines, ideas for every single one of us to think about, but we should never lose hope. Work on it. But if you find yourself not being able to have kavanah one day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we've seen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu values all forms of tefillah. And if one day we're able to concentrate for a little bit more and we're able to continue to work, and other days we're not, there still is power, as we talked about, even to tefillah that is said. The fact that you dedicated time to davening, even if you had trouble with your kavanah, there is still value to that. It's just not the most ideal. I know we ran through that very end, but I don't want to spend another week on this. But I hope this was a lot of food for thought for everybody. And Be'ezrat Hashem, this should help us improve our kavanah moving forward. Just a technical announcement. Next week, I think it's on the schedule, right? Next week, I'm not going to be here, so there won't be shir. I think there won't be a first class. We're going to start at 10:15 next week. Be'ezrat Hashem, in 2 weeks, we'll continue our journey through Tefillah.